sort of standard interpretation, think cockroach, since it's about the most noxious insect we can think of. Samsa is born and finds himself a cockroach. In fact, before that, he was a very bourgeois, I think we could say, little man. He had his job, he had his family, he dutifully went to the job every day, he dutifully supported his family. And suddenly he wakes up and he's completely different. It's a horror story. I've never seen it adequately filmed. I don't know how you would film such a story. But reading it, what makes it so horrible is the fact that Gregor Samsa does not wake up thinking like an insect, whatever that would be. He wakes up thinking like a clerk and a family member and is somehow trying to cope with the impossibility of his new body. There's a sense in which existentialism takes us through such metamorphoses all the time, at least in the thought experiments that it presents to us. And the idea is that we find ourselves sometimes in very strange, even absurd situations, and in those absurd, strange situations, we have to figure out who we are and what we're supposed to do. There's a sense in which you might trace existentialism back to one of the keynotes of modern philosophy, and that is the French philosopher René Descartes, who said rather famously, "I think, therefore I am." Descartes said this as part of a rather lengthy argument, and this was, in fact, a premise that he was to use to prove all sorts of things, but that's not of interest for us here right now. What's important is that the very statement, "I think, therefore I am," is sort of an emblem of a certain kind of philosophy. First of all, notice that the emphasis is on thought. And as I've been stressing, for the existentialist, your existence is not so much bound up with your thinking. In fact, Nietzsche, for example, will say, you never exist quite so much as when you're not thinking. But also, that idea of I am, and I am as a thinking thing, is something that is going to be challenged. For the existentialist, to exist is very much to be a being in the world, to be active, to be engaged. And the very idea that I think, therefore I am, somehow summarizes our self-identity, is to make it sound much simpler than it is. We don't find out who we are just by reflecting on ourselves and say, aha, here I am. But rather, you find out who you are, among other things, by looking to see what you've done, by looking to see how other people think of you, by looking to see how in fact you think of yourself in concrete terms. Because what existentialism is really all about is how we live our lives. The reason why I'm so attached to it is because it seems to me, of all philosophies, it is the one that is most geared to our very real concerns, our very real passions, our very real decisions. And if it's complained that existentialists don't really give us enough advice about precisely what we should do, they really just say things like, take responsibility for your actions, then I think one might conceive of that not so much as a weakness, but rather as the great strength, and in fact very central to the idea of existentialism itself. You don't tell people what they should do. What's central to all these figures is what you should do, how do you live, is up to you. It's up to you to make the choice. It's up to you to gear up the passions, to commit yourself to the choice. And in someone like Nietzsche, it's up to you to discover in yourself who it is you really are, what your real talents and abilities are, the sorts of things that you love, and then commit yourself to those. Existentialism originated, as you can tell from these five figures. Kierkegaard's Danish, Nietzsche and Heidegger are German, Camus and Sartre are French, or in Camus' case French-Algerian. But I would argue that existentialism really has its greatest impact and its greatest power in contemporary America. The fact is that we've always been a society which has prided itself on our sense of responsibility, but I think we've all noticed with a certain amount of despair that in the recent decades, it's all shifted into a kind of sensibility of victimization, a sense that the world is moving too fast for us, a sense that, for example, in politics, we don't make a difference, a sense that religion has gotten somehow superficial, a mere facade, a kind of sham. And we're looking for something deeper. We're looking for something that we can call our own. We're looking for a sense of empowerment, to use a greatly overused contemporary word. The truth is, I think existentialism can give us that, because what existentialism talks about and constantly hammers away is the idea that we are responsible, we do have choices, no matter how complicated or fast-moving the world is, and no matter how superficial those around us might be. We are in charge of our lives. We have to make the choices. We have to understand exactly how dark life can be and figure out what to do with that, as well as figure out where joy lies and pursue that too. So in the lectures that follow, I'm going to be running through these various figures, starting with Camus, and I'd like to give you basically 24 different kinds of illustrations about how these theses play out in practice. Thanks.